Hello and welcome to another timely conversation about Turkish politics. My name is Sinan and I'm a non-resident senior fellow at the Foundation for Defensive Democracies and an associate professor of security studies at the Marine Corps University. Today we're going to speak about Turkey's deteriorating relationship with Israel. Until October 7, 2023 attacks carried out by Hamas against Israeli civilians, Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan was keen to mend relations with Israel, mainly with a view to breaking Turkey's regional isolation in the Middle East. He went to great lengths to court Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and get him to visit Ankara, but all these initiatives were abandoned after October 7. Not only did Erdogan fail to condemn the 10/7 attack, but barely waited 2 weeks before amping up derogatory rhetoric against Israel. Since then, Turkish-Israeli ties seem to hit new lows on a consistent basis. Most recently, Erdogan threatened to invade Israel and also took measures to block its cooperation with NATO. It is difficult to see a positive way forward and just how much worse bilateral ties between the once allied countries will get. To help me put all of this into context, I am joined by Dr. Selin Nasi, who is currently a visiting fellow at the London School of Economics' European Institute. She is an established scholar and analyst of Turkish-Israeli ties and has authored numerous scholarly articles and analysis pieces on the subject, as well as a broader array of subjects on the Middle East. In addition to her scholarly work, Dr. Nasi is a well-known and widely followed foreign policy columnist with articles in known circulars including Politikio, Yetkin Report, and Shalom. In addition to following Dr. Nasi's written work, you can also follow her on X, where she provides timely insights under her handle @Selin Nasi. Selin, welcome to the show, and thanks for making time on a Sunday evening.
Thanks for having me, Sinan.
Let's launch into it. There's so much to talk about, but let's see what we can do with it. So recently, Ankara announced measures to block NATO cooperation with Israel owing to its strong objections to Israeli operations against Hamas in Gaza. This move was sharply rebuked by Israel, with Israeli Foreign Minister Katz calling for Turkey's expulsion from NATO. This state of acrimony between Turkey and Israel, as we know, is not new. President Erdogan has taken a very harsh view of Israel, particularly since the October 7 attacks. Ankara announced the termination of all trade previously with Israel, but this action to block NATO cooperation is arguably different. It may and is likely to affect NATO's security priorities as they relate to the Middle East and Turkey's relationship and dealings with the transatlantic alliance itself. How should we interpret Ankara's move, Selin?
First of all, Sinan, Turkey's using the NATO card against Israel is not new. The Turkish government has previously blocked Israel's participation in NATO exercises within the Mediterranean dialogue framework. Indeed, Turkey's lifting its veto over Israel's participation has been considered barometer of bilateral relations. For instance, in 2013, during the Syrian civil war, Turkey requested the deployment of Patriot missiles along the Syrian border. At the time, Turkish-Israeli relations were strained due to the 2010 Mavi Marmara incident, the deadly assault on the 8th flotilla that set sail from Turkey to break the siege in Gaza. And President Obama was working to reconcile the two countries, which led to Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu's apology to Erdogan over the phone, brokered by President Obama. The devil is in the details, though, because the United States, Germany, and the Netherlands agreed to deploy the Patriot missiles. At around the same time, Turkey lifted its veto over Israel's participation in NATO exercises. In 2017, when I got a chance to interview Philip Gordon for my PhD research, he said that he could not deny or confirm any link between these developments, but he said Turkey's decision might have created a favorable environment for the deployment of the missiles, which suggests that this might be used as a leverage. So coming back to the issue of Turkey's using the NATO card again. By using the NATO card, Ankara is obviously taking a stand against Israel because of the ongoing humanitarian crisis in Gaza. When we consider President Erdogan's recent remarks, he portrays Israel as a destabilizing force in the region and promotes Turkey as a balancing actor. And this is not new either, because in 2010, Israel was identified as a threat in Turkey's national security policy document, aka the Red Book. But of course, the language is very harsh, and the rhetoric is escalating. And as you said, since the Gaza campaign began, Turkey has taken a tougher stance against Israel. And the reason is, well, President Erdogan is basically capitalizing on the growing international resentment against Israel over its conduct of the war in Gaza. By taking a tougher stance against Israel, Erdogan is hoping to shore up domestic support, rally international community around the Palestinian issue, and eventually position Turkey as a key actor in the post-war Gaza. Whether the policy taken is well suited to the objectives is another subject to debate. However, Ankara has taken a number of political and economic measures to sanction Israel, hoping that other countries would follow. That didn't happen, and perhaps we can come back to this issue later on and discuss the reasons why. But one thing is certain, the strategic partnership of the 1990s are long gone. That period was indeed an aberration in the history of bilateral relations, thanks to the Oslo peace process and the aligned interests between the two countries. The relationship between Turkey and Israel has evolved significantly over the years. The power balances in the Middle East have also changed. Turkish policymakers today find more room for maneuvering in domestic politics, as you also know that domestic checks and balances have weakened. And Ankara also finds a more permissive environment in the region. When Ankara looks at the Middle East, it sees a declining US presence in the region, which emboldens its pursuit of strategic, autonomous foreign policy. We are almost 10 months into the war, and there is yet to be a political solution, despite the ongoing intense diplomatic efforts of the US officials shuttling back and forth to the region. And then we have Israel, where domestic politics have taken over foreign policy. Its conduct of the war tarnished the country's international standing, undermined its foreign policy accomplishments of the past decade, and the society is deeply divided. So the window of opportunity to reach a ceasefire agreement is also closing, as the Democrats are feeling the heat of the upcoming elections in November. So against this precarious background, Ankara is trying to leverage its geopolitical significance, mainly its role in the Ukrainian war over the United States, in exchange for its pro-Hamas stance in the Gaza conflict. Let's not forget that President Erdogan sent the protocol for Sweden's admission into NATO to the Turkish parliament for ratification just a week after Israel launched its full force campaign in Gaza. So that was a clear signal that Ankara would adopt a tougher stance against Israel and escalate its rhetoric.
Yeah, I mean, you've lots of points to touch on there. I couldn't agree with a lot of the points raised there, Selin. I mean, it is a far cry from the late 1990s. I remember when the Turkish military was awarded its tank modernization to the tune of about $800 million to the Israeli military, its Air Force upgrades at the time. But we should also probably remember, although it's never been confirmed, that the Israelis were also very influential and helpful in the capture and handing over of Abdullah Öcalan to Turkish authorities.
Absolutely.
That largely has sort of been forgotten. But it's also peculiar from a perspective of, obviously, on the one hand, Turkey being a Muslim country, with Erdogan's strong and vociferous support for Hamas, but also its isolated sort of relationship inside of NATO, being the only NATO country to offer open and unabashed support for Hamas. But lots of interesting points of contrast there. So what about, okay, so now we have a sort of base to which to launch the analysis from. Next question I have would be to say, well, does any party or regional power really benefit from the increasing deterioration of this, what I would call pivotal Israeli-Turkish ties?
Well, obviously, Turkey's regional competitors will benefit from the deterioration of ties between Turkey and Israel, because physics abhors vacuum, as you know. The downturn in Turkish-Israeli relations from 2000 onwards, for example, provided an opportunity for Greece. It was only after Mavi Marmara that the two countries forged closer ties, which led to evolved into a strategic partnership. And this partnership led to the culmination of the East Med Gas Forum. And ironically, in hindsight, Turkey's regional isolation was one of the reasons why Turkish policymakers embarked on a foreign policy reset. So we might be seeing a history repeating itself here. Take, for instance, trade sanctions against Israel. Turkey's decision to impose a trade ban on Israel, with which Turkey has enjoyed a trade surplus, is likely to lead Israelis to diversify their trade in the long run, and they have already started so. The data recently released suggests that trade between Turkey and Israel continues through third countries like Greece. Yeah. So who is benefiting from this? Another example is Turkish Airlines suspending flights to Israel. Passengers who previously chose to fly from Turkey use Turkey as a transit point now fly from Bucharest or Sofia or Athens. And considering that Turkish Airlines used to operate 8 to 10 flights every day on the Tel Aviv-Istanbul route. So this decision carries a huge economic cost. But more importantly, on the political front, with Turkey excluded from the diplomatic process, we see Egypt and Qatar stealing the scene and leading the negotiations alongside with the United States. Turkey, on the other hand, remains on the sidelines, issuing statements of appreciation and support. And on top of everything, the deterioration of Turkey's relations with Israel undermines Turkey's potential to play a constructive role in the Palestinian issue in terms of providing assistance to Palestinians. So I don't see how the steps taken by the Turkish government, including the recent Instagram ban, either serve the resolution of the Palestinian conflict or the Turkish interests here. And at the end of the day, escalatory rhetoric, in my view, damages a leader's reputation, tarnishes a country's image, and provides others with the opportunity to portray that country as an aggressive actor.
Yeah, no doubt, especially that news about trade still continuing via third countries. I mean, one of the rumored reasons why Erdogan may have, or the AKP possibly took such a drubbing at the local elections this year, but who knows, right? All right, final question, which is probably something that worries most of our sort of audiences here in Washington, or even obviously further beyond, but the possibility of a wider war between Israel and other regional powers is greatly feared, especially with, we're assuming Lebanon and Iran. What, in your estimation, would be Turkey's stance if such a scenario came to be?
Being a doomsayer often pays off, especially if you're an expert in the Middle East, for experts specializing in the Middle East. But I would resist the temptation here. I don't see an all-out war scenario likely, primarily because it is not in the interest of the actors involved. However, there is a risk that events could spiral out of control. In such a case, I think Turkey would try to maintain its neutral position as much as possible. Erdogan has been facing criticisms at home to close the Krecik radar station. I don't think Turkey would take such a step, as it would significantly undermine its relations with Washington. However, the deployment of the USS Gerald Ford aircraft in the region, which is a central element of the naval task force in the region, which is also equipped with advanced radar systems, makes me think that Washington is prepared, has a contingency plan here in the event that Turkey decides to close a radar station. But again, things may not be as bad as they seem between Turkey and Israel. Turkey, for example, joined South Africa's International Court of Justice case against Israel early August. But Ankara's submission reportedly avoided a commitment to accept the court's decision binding. Again, there is ambiguity, as we already talked about. There is ambiguity surrounding Turkey's trade restriction on Israel, whether it has been actually enforced or not. And then Ankara still, despite harsh criticisms, maintains the flow of oil from Azerbaijan to Israel, which meets Israel's 40 which meets 40% of Israel's oil demands. So, as I say here, things may not be as bad as it is portrayed in the media. And at the end of the day, there are limits to Ankara's straining ties with Israel at a time when it is trying to improve relations with Washington. And I think Ankara is well aware of that.
Yeah, that's an interesting take. And you're right, with some of these things still going on and seemingly Turkey playing arguably somewhat of a constructive role behind the scenes, although rhetorically very damaging. I think the real damage is probably at the level of the public, right? You know, Turkish public opinion about Israel and Israelis, and vice versa on the Israeli side about, you know, Turks. And I don't know how that gets fixed or rectified. I think at that level, the damage is going to take a lot longer to sort of repair. But that's possibly a discussion for another topic. And obviously, this was not long enough. But it's
before closing, may I make another point? Turkey's pro-Hamas position has led to its exclusion from the diplomatic process, but it seems a cost that Ankara appears willing to bear. However, being left out of the post-war reconstruction, I think that is a scenario Ankara cannot accept. And that is why I anticipate that Ankara will, at some point, soften its rhetoric and adopt a more moderate stance on the Palestinian issue. And in this context, Ankara's invitation to the Palestinian leader Mahmoud Abbas to address the Turkish parliament can be taken as an early signal, can be taken as an indication of a potential policy shift. But I doubt that a policy shift would guarantee Turkey's return.
That's an interesting point. Yeah, again, another possibly self-inflicted wound that's not going to be in Turkey's interest. But again, with all these things, we probably just have to see how this unfolds as the saga continues, and hopefully a wider conflict, as you hopefully predict, is not going to happen, which would be immeasurably worse for everybody concerned in the region. But I think what we'll do is, sadly, we'll have to end it there, simply because that's the nature.
We're running out of time.
Look, again, Dr. Nasi, thank you for taking the time to speak to us on a Sunday and for imparting your valuable input. I think our audiences will very much benefit from this, and hope to have you on the show once again soon.
Thank you.